Now I have a question that's related to theory now. So you seem like a very natural musician. Like you just improvise, you use the sounds. And I know I used to wonder that can't be real. That's fake. But I've met so many of you types that it's real. It's just definitely real. So my
Yeah.
question is, do you ever think about theory? Like now, a lot of people use basso continuo, partimento, thuru bass, general bass. But did you use that at least when you were younger? Uh, or is that a later thing? Or just like theoretically, did you ever conceive of that sort of thing?
To be very honest, until I came to Basel, I actually really actively learned very little theory.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that I have not been taught theory. It just means that I did not learn it by heart.
Right.
I think it was way more of a process of recognizing patterns which I had already been accustomed to and didn't know what
I'm
name
just
to
laughing because
put
I know
on.
exactly I've heard this before.
To give you a very, very brief example of how my knowledges in theory were when I came to Basel, when I performed my audition exam
Yeah.
for Basel, there was also an oral exam, obviously.
Mm,
And at that exam, not only were there also some chords which I didn't exactly know how to
mm,
call correctly in German, so I
right.
mixed up so many languages from Latin to French and English and whatever. But most of the times, I knew exactly what they were asking of me. I just didn't know how to say it. And so therefore, I would just say the notes. As in, like,
Mm,
again, another example of that perfect pitch
yeah.
recognition kind of process.
Yeah.
So they would play some, let's say, intervals or like some chords, some inversions, some, I don't know, patterns. And I
Mm,
would just tell them literally note by note what they played.
mm, okay.
And so then they told me, then they told me, like I think they actually even interrupted the exam at some point and they said like, ah, okay, fair enough, you're one of those with perfect pitch, all right, you're in, fine.
So
But I
cool.
still
I
had to
admire that. That's
learn.
so cool. No, but at some point, you did, I guess, learn theory at Basel, the Schola Cantorum. They taught you how to, yeah, like you said, labeling things you already knew. Could you describe that process? Was it helpful for you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can say, first of all, it has been really existential to me in terms of nowadays also expressing myself in while teaching. I
Right.
could not name any analysis in the pieces if I hadn't learned all the theory. But not only because of that, it's also because it really helps you save specific patterns in your mind. So if you
Yeah.
can allocate a name to a specific construction, let's say, or pattern that you then associate with a passage in a piece that you have learned.
Yeah.
When you see it again in other pieces, you automatically also um, can remember that theoretical concept as well. And so
Yeah.
it's again, maybe for me, more of this process of recognition rather than an actual cognition,
Mm.
but still, it's incredibly important also because it helps you also really differentiate composers from each other.
Right. And in Basel, do they teach you General Bass? Is that like the foundation, basically what they teach you? So it's like the not the way people, I mean, people today think of figured bass as Roman numerals and inversions and that sort of thing. I mean, that's the mainstream.
Mhm.
But do you use like the way Bach would have done it? So basically more from directly from the bass and just thinking of the bass essentially.
I actually do, yes.
Okay.
But I think that's also way more the case, especially because I'm playing the piano and because I'm a pianist, and therefore, whether we want it or not, at some point we learn to think rather vertically
Okay.
than horizontally.
Oh, can you explain? So, I mean, maybe is that true also in the I've heard that in the 19th century there's this lot more of the vertical harmony sort of thinking. But maybe just can you talk about the difference between vertical and horizontal, and in theory, and how you learned and how you would teach?
To be honest, I really learned it. I learned so much of it actually through experiences as well.
Okay.
And I learned it from mostly from the differences. So I learned the difference from the difference itself, if that makes any sense. So basically, let's put it this way. Because I mentioned also the song accompaniment.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we talked in that course, whenever we talked about the different styles of composers, and let me just take a specific example here. Let's take Hugo Wolf on one side and Johannes Brahms on the other side. They actually lived in the same period, more or less, one of them a bit later. However, they were in a perfect contrast to each other. First of all, among themselves. So Brahms never really thought Hugo Wolf was really as great as composer as he was acclaimed, and the other way around.
Oh,
Okay,
the
so
other
the
way
feeling
around
was
too.
really
Okay. I know
exactly.
Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky didn't like Brahms, but Brahms is awesome.
That's
Anyway, yeah.
that's also true. That
Yeah.
is, of course, yeah, that's also true.
Yeah.
Well, however, you cannot have
Yeah.
everything in life.
Yeah.
And when we were discussing the stylistical differences between the two, we were looking very closely at how both of them use the text.
Hmm.
Because since it's a song, obviously you have some text that you make music on. And if you take Brahms, for instance, he literally composes the music based on the text, in the sense that he writes the music that he feels when he listens to the text. And then he adjusts the text to the music as he composes it.
Hmm.
Yeah. So basically for him, the music, let's put it also this way, like the vertical structure of the music is absolutely in the first place for him.
Okay.
For Hugo Wolf, it's so to say exactly the opposite. So Hugo Wolf would really compose word by word. And this is also one of the reasons why his songs are usually incredibly short.
Okay.
And also, if you feel like doing that, it's quite a nice experiment. If you actually take the text away from a song by Hugo Wolf and you only listen to the music without the text, you will find the music very weird. Whereas if you do the same with Brahms, you take the text away, you just have the piano and the singing voice, and it will sound like a wonderful piece of music. It doesn't even matter what kind of a text was intended for it or it emerged from, but it would absolutely perfectly work on its own without the text as well.
Hmm.
So in this example, obviously, I'm very much focusing on the text and the usage of the text. But I would also say that, for instance, someone like Brahms was really a constructor of really vertical harmonies, and his horizontal way of composing was basically in the structure, so in the
Okay.
form. Whereas with someone like Hugo Wolf, literally wrote the music for the words. So his music is based on a line, and he found the appropriate chords to emphasize that line.
Right. No, okay. You talked about theory, especially in the later part of the course. Let's talk about theory. So here, okay, for instance, in the course, there is a mention of some galant fonte monte, but there's also
Mhm.
harmonic functionality. So what's your position on, like, Roman numerals, function theory? Because that's German in the 19th century. No one is erasing that history. That happened in the 19th century. So, what's your perspective on that? And you anything you want, it's your answer. So,
Well, you do need it. You really do need it, especially at the specific level, and especially if you want to maybe even play pieces which are not played so often. Very often, you only get access to scores which are very old and maybe which are also very close to the actual manuscript. And you have to consider the fact that composers, especially back then, where they also hardly, I mean, they didn't have any electricity, yeah, so they literally they had to make use of the light as efficiently as they could. And therefore they wrote incredibly quickly, very, very fast. And um, so when you have notation which is incredibly scarce, the fact is that the composers themselves, of course, knew how to embellish that,
Mhm.
but it's really very helpful also for you to know how to embellish that, because even if you have a passacaglia or something that's really a wonderful piece, also in Handel's repertoire are pieces like that very often, where you would have an original score of, let's say, something like this. um, yeah, I mean, you wouldn't really want to play 10 minutes of that in a concert. So in order to be able to really variate your way and to make it really special, also to make it individual, of course, theory is your most important.
But wait, Joanna, so my question is quite specific. So, like, I'm so used to the North American system, which is, you label the Roman numeral, you say this is the the
Uh-huh.
mediant and the. So I'm specifically asking about the comparison between General Bass, which is just the figures underneath, just the bass, and like, oh, this is the just the arrow, and this is the Roman numeral, and then this is the function. This is the function of that function. So, like, what's your perspective on that?
Right, I get you now. I personally am rather used to actual numerals, but of course,
You mean
I did also
figures,
get.
right? The
Yes,
number.
exactly,
Okay, okay, okay.
exactly, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But I did also get used to the functionality, like you say,
Okay.
so like dominant, subdominant, and everything else, and the use of them, especially identifying them in the scores.
Okay.
But I
But
personally,
are you talking about the scale degree rather than
yes,
the name? Okay, so you can say this
yes,
is the second scale degree, this is the seventh
yes,
scale degree. Okay.
exactly. That's also
Mhm.
what you'll find in my course. I
Okay.
name them as scale degrees.
Okay. 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 So, uh, you okay? So, okay, theory is such a complicated thing for beginners, and it really. But I noticed that I like the improvising musicians tend to use like you say, the numerals or the figures under the bass, and that's very helpful. You find that very helpful.
I find it helpful. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, great, and that's what I expected, so to speak. So